It's Sunday, August 24th, and Tropical Storm Fernand just formed out in the Atlantic. Now, luckily for us, Tropical Storm Fernand is only expected to be a tropical storm, nothing more, and it is also expected to just be a fish storm as it trails out into the Atlantic, not affecting any land at all. So definitely great news for us. And on the tropical weather outlook, we can see another disturbance, which is expected to make its way into the Caribbean this week. And this is actually going to be the area to watch. Since yesterday, it has uptrended greatly. And now it looks like we could potentially see a storm out of this. Now, any predictions on where this might go is pretty much just not worth making at this point because we're so far out and they don't hold any weight. But there is definitely greater confidence that this could form into something, and we're definitely going to want to stay very weather aware of anything in this region. And here are the Euro ensembles. Yesterday, we only saw about 5 ensembles claiming onto this. Now we're seeing probably close to triple that. And then we're also seeing it bring into this Caribbean region, which is really that region that we see some very intense storms develop. These are some of the hottest ocean temperatures in the world. So just something to keep a heads up on and stay weather aware on. If this does form, it's still only a 40% chance of formation. But if we were to see something in the Caribbean down here, definitely want to stay weather aware on that. And there is also going to be a pretty small isolated risk of severe weather today out here in the upper plains convergence zone in eastern Colorado. And other specific areas which I do think could see some strong storms would be a lineup here in the northeast, then also pretty much a widespread range back out west. But our marginal risk area is mostly going to be fueled by the threat of some 60-mile-an-hour damaging winds, and then also the conditional threat of seeing potentially some 1 to 1.5 inch in diameter hail, and that both covers our entire marginal risk area. And the Storm Prediction Center has not outlined a tornado threat at all. However, I do think we could potentially see a small one materialize, with potentially a storm cluster expected to develop in far western Kansas later in the morning, and then also potentially in our upper plains convergence zone as well. But both those would be very conditional. And then for our flood outlook, we have quite a few little blotches which could see some 2 to 4 inch rain swaths. That's going to be all of our site risk. One out here in far eastern California, one out here in southern Utah, then another one out here in western Kansas, eastern Colorado, and the Oklahoma Panhandle. Then we have a couple of marginal risk, which would just be for the conditional threat of 1 to 2 inches of rainfall, one spanning quite a bit of the west, then also a little bit of the southern plains, one out here in Florida, far eastern North Carolina, then that blotch up here in the northeast, which could potentially see some strong storms as well. And then for pretty much anybody that's not in the southern plains, lower Mississippi River Valley, or southeast, you are going to like your temperatures for the next week. It's going to be some beautiful weather pretty much everywhere but that region I just mentioned, then also the immediate Pacific coast. We're going to see a lot of mid 70s to even low 70s feels like temperatures in this region. But for pretty much everywhere else that is not up there, you will still be seeing some mid 90s feels like temperatures. And then here's what the radar could look like in our main risk area of severe weather today. We could potentially see a storm cluster initiated by some troughing and also a vorticity maximum embedded in that trough around daybreak. This would also have the low level jet to help it, and there is a conditional risk of seeing a couple of spin up tornadoes with this, although it's not going to be very high. The main thing would just be for the conditional threat of potentially some 60-mile-an-hour damaging gust, although that is going to be pretty conditional as well because the atmosphere won't really have a lot of time to have recovered at this point because daybreak would have just occurred. But the main risk of severe weather out here is going to develop a bit more later in the afternoon. We can already see some storm initiation occurring out here across the upper plains convergence zone brought by a high pressure system and some troughing, then that convergence, which we of course see in the upper plains convergence zone. And this corridor is going to be the main area where we could see some storms bring some 60-mile-an-hour damaging winds, then also some hail in that 1 to 2 inch in diameter range. We're specifically looking for a couple of discrete storms potentially in front of our main cluster. These would be the strongest storms out of that. And also because of the nature and geography of the region, I do think there is a very, very small tornado risk if these storms could get a tad bit more surface based, but it's going to be very, very small. And then for other areas which aren't really in the immediate risk of seeing some severe weather, but definitely seeing some strong thunderstorms would be out here pretty much in the entire West, spanning the four corner states, Utah and Nevada. And this is also going to be brought by that high pressure system as well, bringing quite a lot of organizing flow to the region. And the second area would be this little line up here along a cold front and a trough in the Northeast. This specific corridor stretching from central Pennsylvania through New York and then even potentially up into Canada is going to be the line to watch for potentially some strong thunderstorms today. And these would also be seen around the afternoon hours. And the trough helping to initiate some of those storms is seen here in our 500 millibar winds, also bringing some organizing flow and quite a bit of forcing to the region up here in the Northeast. Definitely going to see that line of storms develop today. Then another thing that we're going to see is that Vort Max pushing through with a short wave back in our plains risk area today. This is also going to be that region for that little cluster of thunderstorms potentially being severe. And we'll also see that high pressure system squeezing a lot of airflow between our big trough, which is another reason why I definitely think we'll see potentially some severe weather out there today. Then we'll also see a trough digging a bit deeper all the way into Florida. So definitely some thunderstorms out in Florida today as well, although likely not being severe. And this is the storm environment in our main risk area, specifically being in the upper plains convergence zone. We can see that we have a nice elongated hodograph and quite a bit of bulk shear. Definitely some organized storms. Our cloud base is going to be a bit on the higher end. Now, could these storms potentially get slightly closer to that 1 kilometer tornado threshold? Potentially, although it's not looking super likely. But because our 3 cape is going to be quite high and the geography of this region is conducive for potentially seeing a couple of spin ups, I am not going to rule that out completely today. But the main thing is that it's going to be moist, 54 dew point for that region specifically. Then there's also going to be 2,500 cape. So definitely just favorable for severe weather in general. On the hail side of things, our freezing level is a bit higher up to actually see some hail, but because we do have quite a bit of organizing shear, some decent mid-level lapse rate, 7.2 Celsius decreasing per kilometer, there is going to be that conditional threat for that as well. And then our low-level lapse rates are going to be quite high, so definitely favorable for some 60-mile-an-hour damaging gusts. Then we see that classic inverted V look that we see with some severe weather days. And here's what's going to be in front of that small little cluster out in far western Kansas. We can see that our shear and helicity is going to be quite a bit better to potentially see a little bit of a tornado threat develop. Then our cloud base would be low enough to support that as well. And our bulk shear is going to be extremely high, nearing 60 knots. So that's probably going to be organized and could potentially last all the way down to far northern Texas. Mostly it would just redevelop down there. And then we also see some wind veering. So very organized, potentially a spin up tornado threat with this. But the main threat would just be for potentially some damaging winds in that 60-mile-an-hour range. I don't think really a hail threat is going to materialize with this, or it's not going to be that big. Because we do have so much bulk shear, I think it's a possibility that 1 inch in diameter hail would be in play with this, but it's going to be pretty much a entirely linear mode. But I do think this storm cluster is actually somewhat conditional as well. We do have that short wave with that Vort Max pushing through. So I definitely think there will be something, but the severity of it is a bit unsure. We do have enough moisture, but it's looking like it's going to be pretty stable out there, not even reaching 1,000 cape. So that could hinder that quite a bit. But all this considered, I wouldn't be surprised to see some severe weather with that.